What is the consensus model and the revenue model for a Dapp?
Well, consensus is multi-layer, so we have BFT synchronization mechanism on the lowest level, similar to PBFT. So we have a limited number of nodes which they can change over time, but at each point there is a fixed number of nodes, and this is kind of a solved problem in computer science. People already know how to do it and do it fast. So if you, let's say, playing a game, that's probably all you want, that confirmation from, let's say, 7 out of 10 nodes, that should be sufficient for most transactions. Then on the other hand, like if you are dealing with a bigger transfer, we use anchoring, which means we take a hash of a block and we put it in another blockchain, and which is configured in such a way that there can be only one hash at certain time. So you cannot commit like different histories, so it makes sure there is a consensus. So that way it's also multi-layered. First we get system anchoring chain, which makes sure that basically all nodes within Chromapolis agree which block was at certain height. And then we can itself anchor the whole Chromapolis in a proof-of-work blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum, maybe both, to make sure that even, let's say, even if all nodes of Chromapolis are compromised, if there is some systemic failure, we can still figure out which block was first, and that is sufficient for consensus. At least you can recover from that. Of course, the bigger is damage, the longer time it takes to recover from it. But yeah, the general, we need to make sure that it's always possible, that we always know which state is correct. And a business model, it can be different. Basically, of course, the Dapp needs to pay for its hosting, and for different Dapps, they might require different number of nodes. Like if you're doing something very decentralized, maybe you would require 100 nodes from 100 different providers. But for game, it can be much lower, as low as 4, for example, if it's small scale. And Dapp itself can charge money. So one option is a developer might subsidize a Dapp, maybe, or maybe some sponsor, if it's like socially, some social good. Maybe there is some sponsor who will provide fees needed to host this data on the Dapp. But yeah, Dapp can charge users. It can be per action or subscription-based, maybe even freemium, like you might have invitations for free users. And premium users, they give certain perks. Maybe they can get more features, or can post more, or can invite other users. So that could be like enthusiast users who are more active, they are paying, and subsidizing costs for free users who also bring something to the ecosystem.
Who would be hosting these Dapps?
Providers, that's going to be, we are aiming at professional hosters, because if you host, if it's a person in his basement, having server in his basement, we can't be sure that he will be online all the time, that he has the right hardware and so on. But most importantly, the problem is that we cannot verify that users are distinct. So somebody who wants to compromise the system, he can impersonate 1 million of different users, and then he will crash 1 million nodes at the same time. So you cannot control decentralization on the user levels. Basically, it's called a Sybil attack, and it's something very hard to control. So we aim that every provider will be verified, that it's actual separate business entity with its own like history of operation and so on. So this is something which is easier to verify. Of course, we are not aiming like to 100% certainty that the providers are distinct. But if the majority of them are distinct, the system will work. So that's the model, that it will be like a professional hoster who knows how to run nodes in a secure way, and giving it enough resources, networking, computation, and so on. They will be responsible for security. They will have a security deposit. So, for example, if the node is compromised and falls down, that the security deposit is taken. So they should take all the measures necessary to secure their nodes. And yeah, so it could be like existing hosting providers can join this system. So they might take, basically it's a new business for them. They might get additional revenue, and it can bring the cost down because there is competition between these hosting providers. So they cannot gouge basically prices and extract very high profits from the system.
So there is a lot of power in the Chromapolis system. I guess you've thought a lot about this, and you have different ideas of what could be done. Could you share with us some ideas or just concepts that you think would be interesting to do?
Like
on the Dapp level.
On the Dapp level, like what kinds of Dapps are possible?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we first, like the inspiration for Chromapolis was actually from the gaming side. So I, like as a hobby, I've played some strategy games, and I saw that a farm game, they kind of have like a very rudimentary economy, which is maybe sufficient if you play it for a day, but then it becomes very boring. And I thought on the tokens, with token systems, you have usually very kind of rich economy, which is open to all the participants. So why can't we make basically a strategy game on the blockchain? And as we made the post-chain, which is very general, I found that it's actually feasible. So that was the initial idea, that we can host strategy games, and we can host not just tokens, but the entire game world on the, in the blockchain, to have this application on the blockchain. And I personally had many other ideas for Dapps, which I guess would be easier to execute on Chromapolis. For example, I wrote, was a co-author of academic article about the decentralized prediction market. I also have been working on some derivative trading platforms. So this can also work quite well on Chromapolis. There are also like social media. So with things like Twitter, there is a lot of concern that one company has a lot of power to...
So the centralized prediction market, distributed some kind of exchange, social media, all these things could possibly be engineered on the Chromapolis platform.
Yes, so potentially it can be pretty much anything. Of course, there are limitations. So if you have very high concerns that your application is going to be attacked by government, or it's doing something which is illegal, maybe it's better to host on Ethereum, because on Ethereum we have a single blockchain, which is kind of, it will be hard to attack the whole blockchain just for a single application. For example, Chromapolis doesn't provide maybe this kind of resilience. But on the other hand, if it's something which is not illegal, then why would you pay for Ethereum costs to host it?
But would Ethereum have the necessary bandwidth to host a social media platform?
It probably does. I mean, I don't think so. At least not now. They promise some sharding, but there are like limitations with indexing, for example. Usually it's done. So you have Ethereum node, which works on consensus, but the indexing it offers, it's very poor. So you need another server to index the content. And the question is like, do we trust this server? So who is going to run this server? Do we trust it? So it becomes a big concern, like aren't we going to have same centralized model just moderated by Ethereum? Probably doesn't make sense if you still have servers run by some entities.
And if we look at it from the other way, what would be the advantages of a social media platform running on blockchain compared to how they are run now?
Well, it can offer more options. to the users. It can, for example, censorship. This is something can be done on user level. So let's say if I don't want to see hate speech, I maybe configure some filter to avoid it. And maybe it can be crowdsourced as well, so somebody will flag.
But that can be done today also. I mean, if any of the social media platforms made it, I could probably have some.
Yeah, they made, but they don't have incentive. They basically, these platforms, they aim for the majority of users, let's say 90% of users, to post maybe some non-provocative content, and they make money from every user. So they don't have to cater to every user to survive. So people who have like different views, like maybe they want to do it their way, maybe they want to engage in more provocative way, maybe something new ideas which are not tolerated within society. Maybe they just want some different kinds of interaction with the system. Their needs are not served because this kind of centralized platforms, they want everybody to go to the website, to watch the ads. Basically, they make money on ads, so they do not invite alternative clients, for example. They kind of break APIs intentionally to disable these alternative clients, to take choices away from people and send them to the place where this maximizes the profit for the company. On the centralized system, you don't have the same incentive structure, so it doesn't make money on you in the same way. So you can have a lot of different ways of interaction in this kind of system.
So you change the incentive structure to be more about user control in a way.
Yes, so we basically take away profit, potentially at least. We can take away profit from it. So there is no entity which kind of tries to make profit on users, because users can pay directly for hosting. And hosting is a commodity, so there is not much profit to be made on it. It's commodity, so if somebody tries to extract more profit, another company can come and underbid and basically take less profit. And so this way, it's more direct relationships that users can pay directly for development of features they want. They can pay directly for the hosting costs, and there is no entity which is kind of in antagonistic relationship with what users want.
Mm. So the word hosting sounds similar to hostage in a way. So I'm thinking, like, if I'm running on a Chromapolis, I'm using a Chromapolis platform. It's social media, or it's a game, and suddenly the software that runs this Dapp decides that nobody can mention the color blue. What do I do? Can I fork or?
Yes. So on some level, there is users always have, because data is public and code is public as well. Or it's should be open source actually. Users can, in the worst case, let's say all the providers of the system became corrupt and do not want certain actions to be taken. Users can take away their data and migrate to another platform. Because it's open source, it doesn't take a lot of effort to set up. So users can just migrate. Of course, it's going to be, they will suffer from disruption for some time, but they still can restart it if somebody is willing to host this data, if it's not like too provocative, such provocative that nobody in the world wants to host this data. Then of course there is a question about legality of this content, like nobody wants to profit from it. But if it's not too provocative, they should be able to find another hoster and migrate to it. Of course, they need to coordinate with each other, but what's important is that they have a choice. They have this option, and it's something which providers need to take into account, so they know, also authorities, and they know if they kind of censor certain things that then users can migrate. So it doesn't really make sense to censor if there is an active user base which wants to use certain words or whatever it's being censored.
So if I'm playing a game, a massive multiplayer game, and there is I had this diamond encrusted sword that has taken me 4 years to get, and suddenly the company decides popularity drives, anyone can get one if they stare at the logo for 1 week or something like that. So could you then fork the game and say we don't like the new rules, we don't like the changing what we think are the fundamentals of the game?
Yes, at least on the technical level, of course, there might be some difficulties with doing that in practice, but technically the rules for updating the system, they're encoded in the Dapp itself. Of course, somebody can make a Dapp which allows update at any time, but that's not really useful kind of Dapp. So users should verify that. Maybe there will be a market for kind of authentication after basically for audit of these applications to make sure that the developer doesn't take too many rights from users. So it should be consensual. So potentially users might vote for this update and do not allow the company to do this update if they want updatable game to make something which is disruptive to game economy. Also, even if let's say majority of users decide that this source should be for everyone, you still have, if you have a minority who disagrees, you can fork the application, because everything is open source, you can copy it at any time. And if there is enough users to sustain the game, if they can pay the hosting cost, if they're really interested about this matter, they will be able to run this original version the way they want.